Hello there, how is everybody doing today? My name is Zola, and welcome to the T4S. I am continuing with the Ancient Mysteries and Secret Societies, and this will be part 3. And yeah, we're just going to pick up where we left off. So here we go. The most famous of the ancient religious mysteries were the Eleusinian, whose rites were celebrated every 5 years in the city of Eleusis to honor Ceres. And in brackets it says Demeter, Rhea, or Re, or Isis, and her daughter Persephone. The initiates of the Eleusinian school were famous throughout Greece for the beauty of their philosophic concepts and the high standards of morality that they demonstrated in their daily lives. Because of their excellence, these mysteries spread to Rome and Britain, and later the initiations were given in both these countries. The Eleusinian mysteries, named for the community in Attica where the sacred dramas were first presented, are generally believed to have been founded by Eumolpos around 1400 years before Christ. And through the Platonic system of philosophy, their principles have been preserved to modern times. Thank you, Plato. The rites of Eleusis, with their mystic interpretations of nature's most precious secrets, overshadowed the civilizations of their time and gradually absorbed many smaller schools, incorporating into their own system whatever valuable information these lesser institutions possessed. Hecathorn sees in the mysteries of Ceres and Bacchus a metamorphosis of the rites of Isis and Osiris. And there's every reason to believe that all so-called secret schools of the ancient world were branches from one philosophic tree, which, with its root in heaven and its branches on the earth, is, like the spirit of man, an invisible but ever-present cause of the objectified vehicles that give it expression. The mysteries were the channels through which this one philosophic light was disseminated, and their initiates, resplendent with intellectual and spiritual understanding, were the perfect fruitage of the divine tree, bearing witness before the material world of the recondite source of all light and truth. The rites of Eleusis were divided into what were called the lesser and the greater mysteries. According to James Gardner, the lesser mysteries were celebrated in the spring, probably at the time of the vernal equinox, in the town of Agraea, and the greater in the fall, the time of the autumnal equinox, at Eleusis, or Athens. It's supposed that the former were given annually and the latter every 5 years. The rituals of the Eleusinians were highly involved, and to understand them required a deep study of Greek mythology, which they interpreted in its esoteric light with the aid of their secret keys. The lesser mysteries were dedicated to Persephone. In his Eleusinian and Bacchic mysteries, Thomas Taylor sums up their purpose as follows. The lesser mysteries were designed by the ancient theologists, their founders, to signify occultly the condition of the unpurified soul invested with an earthly body and enveloped in a material and physical nature. The legend used in the lesser rites is that of the abduction of the goddess Persephone, the daughter of Ceres, by Pluto, lord of the underworld, or Hades. While Persephone is picking flowers in a beautiful meadow, the earth suddenly opens, and the gloomy lord of death, riding in a magnificent chariot, emerges from its somber depths and, grasping her in his arms, carries the screaming and struggling goddess to his subterranean palace, where he forces her to become his queen. It's doubtful whether many of the initiates themselves understood the mystic meaning of this allegory, for most of them apparently believed that it referred solely to the succession of the seasons. It's difficult to obtain satisfactory information concerning the mysteries, for the candidates were bound by inviolable oaths never to reveal their inner secrets to the profane. At the beginning of the ceremony of initiation, the candidate stood upon the skins of animals sacrificed for the purpose, and vowed that death should seal his lips before he would divulge the sacred truths which were about to be communicated to him. Through indirect channels, however, some of their secrets have been preserved. The teachings given to the neophytes were substantially as follows. The soul of man, often called Psyche, and in the Eleusinian mysteries symbolized by Persephone, is essentially a spiritual thing. Its true home is in the higher worlds, where, free from the bondage of material form and material concepts, it's said to be truly alive and self-expressive. The human or physical nature of man, according to this doctrine, is a tomb, a quagmire, a false and impermanent thing, source of all sorrow and suffering. Plato describes the body as the sepulchre of the soul, and by this he means not only the human form, but also the human nature. The gloom and depression of the lesser mysteries represented the agony of the spiritual soul, unable to express itself because it has accepted the limitations and illusions of the human environment. The crux of the Eleusinian argument was that man is neither better nor wiser after death than during life. If he does not rise above ignorance during his sojourn here, man goes at death into eternity to wander around forever, making the same mistakes that he made here. If he does not outgrow the desire for material possessions here, he will carry it with him into the invisible world, where, because he can never gratify that desire there, he will continue in endless agony. Dante's Inferno is symbolically descriptive of the sufferings of those who never freed their spiritual natures from the cravings, habits, viewpoints, and limitations of their plutonic personalities. Those who made no endeavor to improve themselves, whose souls have slept during their physical lives, passed at death into Hades, where, lying in rows, they slept through all eternity as they slept through life. I have to say that's actually a pretty interesting, idea, and I did kind of see something that makes me think of that. I spent the 90s as a dream yogin, right? I worked my ass off to work on my dream recall, which got better and better and better and better until I eventually reached a point where I could maintain conscious awareness, passing out of the body at night, going around doing whatever all night long, and then coming back in and the body reanimating, and I could maintain that awareness throughout. And what I found out there in those astral layers and different realms and whatever is that the majority of human beings, yes, they're sleeping here while they're going about their earthly lives. They're not interested in the deeper mysteries. They're not interested in their spirit or their soul. They're just completely concerned with, like this guy is saying here, just worrying about their physical stuff, the desire for material possessions and so on. And that's really all that they seem to be about. And so it's a kind of a sleeping kind of existence. It's kind of like when you're driving home from work and you're on autopilot, and you get home and you're like, how did I even get home? I don't even remember doing it, and people go through their lives like that. And the thing is that every night when you sleep, you're leaving your physical body and you're going out into the astral. And these different souls or spirits or whatever of these human beings will go to these different areas. And while they're there, they're the same. They're sleepwalking. And so when you're lucid, which means you're fully conscious and you're aware and you're consciously traveling around there, you will find, at least I did, that most of the average people in these places, it's like you're the ghost. They can't see you until you really get in their face and go, hello, and then they'll kind of go, whoa, like, where'd you come from? Because to them, you were invisible until that moment. And so, yeah, they're sleeping while they're awake in their bodies, and they're sleeping when they're out of their bodies in the astral worlds or whatever, the non-physical realms, while their bodies are in the healing trance every night when they're sleeping, right? So, yeah, if you can't kind of free that spiritual nature from those cravings and habits and so on, it's kind of true, if you don't try to improve yourself while you're alive during your physical life, once you pass, you're going to just continue doing the same freaking stuff. And I do think that there's something to that for sure. Okay, so continuing on here. To the Eleusinian philosophers, birch into the physical world. I don't know. I think that's a typo. That doesn't make sense. Okay. To the Eleusinian philosophers, birth into the physical world was death in the fullest sense of the word. And the only true birth was that of the spiritual soul of man rising out of the womb of his own fleshly nature. The soul is dead that slumbers, says Longfellow. And in this, he strikes the keynote of the Eleusinian mysteries. Just as Narcissus, gazing at himself in the water, in brackets it says the ancients used this mobile element to symbolize the transitory, illusionary, and material universe. So just as he's gazing himself in the water, lost his life trying to embrace a reflection, so man, gazing into the mirror of nature and accepting as his real self the senseless clay that he sees reflected, loses the opportunity afforded by physical life to unfold his immortal, invisible self. An ancient initiate once said that the living are ruled by the dead. That is kind of an interesting observation and comment, because the majority of people that are out here right now on this physical planet are actually spiritually dead, in a sense. And they're the majority, and the majority rules, right? So yeah, those of us who are living, and what I mean by that is that they're working on raising themselves spiritually, and they're working on that stuff. They're kind of like ruled by the dead. Going on, only those conversant with the Eleusinian concept of life could understand that statement. And there you go. It means that the majority of people are not ruled by their living spirits, but by their senseless, hence dead, animal personalities. It's true. It's totally true. I just saw a video the other day, and this poor woman, she got robbed by some piece of shit for, I don't know, $3,000 or something. And while he was robbing her, he picked her up and threw her down on the ground, and now she's fucking paraplegic or something. It's like, thanks, you motherfucker, that's somebody that is spiritually dead, and they're living with their senseless animal personalities, right? They don't have any spirituality at all. They're spiritually dead. Anyone that would do that to somebody else is spiritually dead, I think. Going on, transmigration and reincarnation were taught in these mysteries, but in a somewhat unusual manner. It was believed that at midnight, the invisible worlds were closest to the terrestrial sphere, and that souls coming into material existence slipped in during the midnight hour. For this reason, many of the Eleusinian ceremonies were performed at midnight. Some of those sleeping spirits who had failed to awaken their higher natures during their earth life, and who now floated around in the invisible worlds, surrounded by darkness of their own making, occasionally slipped through at this hour and assumed the forms of various creatures. So I'm just going to interject, and that's sort of where that whole the witching hour midnight comes from, but I think really it's more like between about 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning is, I think, is when it's really thin, personally. Okay, so now there's an illustration here, and it's of a famous sculpture called The Rape of Persephone. It says, Pluto, the lord of the underworld, represents the body intelligence of man, and the rape of Persephone is symbolic of the divine nature, assaulted and defiled by the animal soul and dragged downward into the somber darkness of Hades, which is here used as a synonym for the material or objective sphere of consciousness. In his disquisitions upon the painted Greek vases, James Christie presents Mercius's version of the occurrences taking place during the 9 days required for the enactment of the greater Eleusinian rites. The first day was that of general meeting, during which those to be initiated were questioned concerning their several qualifications. The second day was spent in a procession to the sea, possibly for the submerging of an image of the presiding goddess. The third day was opened by the sacrifice of a mullet. On the fourth day, the mystic basket containing certain sacred symbols was brought to Eleusis, accompanied by a number of female devotees carrying smaller baskets. On the evening of the 5th day, there was a torch race. On the 6th, a procession led by a statue of Iacchus. Sorry, I can't pronounce that. It's spelled Iacchus. And on the 7th, an athletic contest. And the 8th day was devoted to a repetition of the ceremonial for the benefit of any who might have been prevented from coming sooner. And the 9th and last day was devoted to the deepest philosophical issues of the Eleusinia, during which an urn or jar, the symbol of Bacchus, was exhibited as an emblem of supreme importance. The mystics of Eleusis also laid stress upon the evil of suicide, explaining that there was a profound mystery concerning this crime of which they could not speak, but warning their disciples that a great sorrow comes to all who take their own lives. This in substance constitutes the esoteric doctrine given to the initiates of the lesser mysteries. As you know, it's funny because I'm just going to interject for a second here, but the whole reason that I ended up spending an entire decade working so hard to become lucid, to recall my dreams, then become lucid, and then maintain that lucidity, and so on, until finally that naturally led to out of bodies and, consciously exploring all these different astral realms and so on that I could get to, was because there was somebody that I cared a lot about, and they had died very tragically. And some people had said or claimed that this person had taken their own life. But I didn't think so. And I wanted to find them. And it's a long story, but after about 7 years, I did actually find this person. And they didn't know they were dead. So, they were still doing the same things that they used to do when they were alive. They didn't even know they were dead. So... going on here. As the degree dealt largely with the miseries of those who failed to make the best use of their philosophic opportunities, the chambers of initiation were subterranean, and the horrors of Hades were vividly depicted in a complicated ritualistic drama. After passing successfully through the torturous passageways with their trials and dangers, the candidate received the honorary title of Mistis. This meant one who saw through a veil or had a clouded vision. It also signified that the candidate had been brought up to the veil, which would be torn away in the higher degree. The modern word mystic, as referring to a seeker after truth according to the dictates of the heart along the path of faith, is probably derived from this ancient word, for faith is belief in the reality of things unseen or veiled. The greater mysteries, it says here in brackets, into which the candidate was admitted only after he'd successfully passed through the ordeals of the lesser, and not always then, were sacred to Ceres, the mother of Persephone, and represent her as wandering through the world in a quest for her abducted daughter. Ceres carried 2 torches, intuition and reason, to aid her in the search for her lost child, the soul. At last, she found Persephone not far from Eleusis, and out of gratitude taught the people there to cultivate corn, which is sacred to her. She also founded the mysteries. Ceres appeared before Pluto, god of the souls of the dead, and pleaded with him to allow Persephone to return to her home. This the god at first refused to do because Persephone had eaten of the pomegranate, the fruit of mortality. At last, however, he compromised and agreed to permit Persephone to live in the upper world half of the year if she would stay with him in the darkness of Hades for the remaining half. The Greeks believed that Persephone was a manifestation of the solar energy, which in the winter months lived under the earth with Pluto, but in the summer returned again with the goddess of productiveness. There is a legend that the flowers loved Persephone, and that every year when she left for the dark realms of Pluto, the plants and shrubs would die of grief, while the profane and uninitiated had their own opinions on these subjects, the truths of the Greek allegories remain safely concealed by the priests, who alone recognize the sublimity of these great philosophic and religious parables. Thomas Taylor epitomizes the doctrines of the greater mysteries in the following statement. The greater mysteries, obscurely intimated by mystic and splendid visions, the felicity of the soul, both here and hereafter, when purified from the defilement of a material plane and constantly elevated to the realities of intellectual, spiritual vision. Just as the lesser mysteries discuss the prenatal epoch of man, when the consciousness of its 9 days, embryologically in months, was descending into the realm of illusion and assuming the veil of unreality, so the greater mysteries discussed the principles of spiritual regeneration and revealed to initiates not only the simplest but also the most direct and complete method of liberating their higher natures from the bondage of material ignorance. Like Prometheus chained to the top of Mount Caucasus, man's higher nature is chained to his inadequate personality. The 9 days of initiation were also symbolic of the 9 spheres through which the human soul descends during the process of assuming a terrestrial form. The secret exercises for spiritual unfoldment given to disciples of the higher degrees are unknown. But there is every reason to believe that they were similar to the Brahmanic mysteries, since it's known that the Eleusinian ceremonies were closed with the Sanskrit words Conx om pax. That part of the allegory referring to the 2 6-month periods, during one of which Persephone must remain with Pluto, while during the other she may revisit the upper world, offers material for deep consideration. It's probable that the Eleusinians realized that the soul left the body during sleep. That's right. Or at least was made capable of leaving by the special training which undoubtedly they were in a position to give. What was I just talking about? Thus, Persephone would remain as the queen of Pluto's realm during the waking hours, but would ascend to the spiritual worlds during the periods of sleep. Now that's interesting because easily half of our living lives as human beings, we are spending those sleeping. And that's not spent just laying in a bed snoring. What actually happens is that your physical body goes into its nightly healing trance, and the part of you that is the animating force, that is eternal, that doesn't need to rest like that, it continues. You go out and about and you do stuff and you talk with other beings and you meet other people and you work on problems, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. I spent many years going to these, it was some kind of a university, a place of higher learning, and I was attending classes. Did a lot of that. Anyways, the initiate was taught how to intercede with Pluto to permit Persephone, the initiate's soul, ascend from the darkness of his material nature into the light of understanding. When thus freed from the shackles of clay and crystallized concepts, the initiate was liberated not only for the period of his life, but for all eternity. For never thereafter was he divested of those soul qualities which after death were his vehicles for manifestation and expression in the so-called heaven world. In contrast to the idea of Hades as a state of darkness below, the gods were said to inhabit the tops of mountains, a well-known example being Mount Olympus, where the 12 deities of the Greek pantheon were said to dwell together. In his initiatory wanderings, the neophyte therefore entered chambers of ever-increasing brilliancy to portray the ascent of the spirit from the lower worlds into the realms of bliss. I got to interject, wouldn't that just be something? I would love to go through that. There's just nothing like that in existence today, I think, there's absolutely no emphasis, it seems, whatsoever placed upon this kind of spiritual involvement. It's all about just pay the bills and work and produce and consume, and it's absolutely soulless. Of course, that's all by design, as we know, right? But it certainly would have been interesting and illuminating, to be in a culture and a place where this kind of stuff was considered important and they actually taught you this stuff. Anyways, as the climax to such wanderings, he entered a great vaulted room, in the center of which stood a brilliantly illuminated statue of the goddess Ceres. Here, in the presence of the Hierophant and surrounded by priests in magnificent robes, he was instructed in the highest of the secret mysteries of the Eleusis. At the conclusion of the ceremony, he was hailed as an epoptes, which means one who has beheld or seen directly. For this reason also initiation was termed autopsy. The epoptes was then given certain sacred books, probably written in a cipher together with tablets of stone on which secret instructions were engraved. In the Obelisk in Freemasonry, John A. Weiss describes the officiating personages of the Eleusinian mysteries as consisting of a male and a female hierophant who directed the initiations, a male and a female torchbearer, a male herald, and a male and a female altar attendant. There were also numerous minor officials. He states that according to Porphyry, the hierophant represents Plato's demiurgus, or creator of the world, the torchbearer the sun, the altarman the moon, the herald Hermes, or Mercury, and the other officials, minor stars. From the records available, a number of strange and apparently supernatural phenomena accompanied the rituals. Of course, of course. Many initiates claim to have actually seen the living gods themselves. Whether this was the result of religious ecstasy or the actual cooperation of invisible powers with the visible priests must remain a mystery. I would interject there and say, just working by myself, working on these things and so on, doing the best I can alone, these extra-dimensional beings will show up. And sometimes it's just like an energy that fills the room. Other times it might be an orb of light. I'm not saying that they literally walk in and sit down and have a cup of tea with you. It's not like that. But the presence when they show up is kind of unmistakable. So yeah, I can totally believe it, that all these people coming together with all that powerful intention would have been like a magnet, for these other beings, because like energy attracts like energy, right? They would have shown up. Anyways, in the Metamorphosis or Golden Ass, Apuleius thus describes what in all probability is his initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries. I approached to the confines of death, and having trod on the threshold of Proserpine, I returned from it, being carried through all the elements. At midnight, I saw the sun shining with a splendid light, and I manifestly drew near to the gods beneath and the gods above, and proximately adored them. Women and children were admitted to the Eleusinian mysteries, and at one time there was literally thousands of initiates. Because this vast host was not prepared for the highest spiritual and mystical doctrines, a division necessarily took place within the society itself. The higher teachings were given to only a limited number of initiates who, because of superior mentality, showed a comprehensive grasp of their underlying philosophical concepts. Socrates refused to be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, for knowing its principles without being a member of the order, he realized that membership would seal his tongue. That the mysteries of Eleusis were based upon great and eternal truths is attested by the veneration in which they were held by the great minds of the ancient world. M. Overoff asks, would Pindar, Plato, Cicero, Epictetus have spoken of them with such admiration if the Hierophant had satisfied himself with loudly proclaiming his own opinions or those of his order. The garments in which candidates were initiated were preserved for many years and were believed to possess almost sacred properties. Just as the soul can have no covering save wisdom and virtue, so the candidates, being as yet without true knowledge, were presented to the mysteries unclothed, being first given the skin of an animal and later a consecrated robe to symbolize the philosophical teachings received by the initiate. During the course of initiation, the candidate just a second. Oh, there we go. Passed through 2 gates. Sorry, I had to jump across a bunch of notes there. The first led downward into the lower worlds and symbolized his birth into ignorance. The second led upward into a room brilliantly lighted by unseen lamps, in which was the statue of Ceres, and which symbolized the upper world, or the abode of light and truth. Strabo states that the great temple of Eleusis would hold between 20 and 30,000 people. The caves dedicated by Zarathustra also had these 2 doors, symbolizing the avenues of birth and death. Okay, there's a bunch of notes here, and I just want to go back and take a quick view at them with you. Okay, so Ceres, or Demeter, was the daughter of Kronos and Rhea, and by Zeus, the mother of Persephone. Some believe her to be the goddess of the earth, but more correctly, she's the deity protecting agriculture in general and corn in particular. The poppy is sacred to Ceres, and she's often shown carrying or ornamented by a garland of these flowers. In the mysteries, Ceres represented riding in a chariot drawn by winged serpents, and I'm just wondering if this poppy that's sacred to Ceres, I mean, like you make a tea out of like poppies, right? I mean, you oh my goodness, it's like, well, let me tell you, it certainly opens up different worlds, let's put it that way. It's kind of like ayahuasca, or, you know what I mean? Like, or taking acid or something, it really, really is a trip. I wonder if that's why, because it was kind of like a gateway to alternate dimensions or something, was that why it was sacred? In the initiation of the Bacchic mysteries, the role of Bacchus is played by the candidate who, set upon by priests in the guise of the Titans, is slain and finally restored to life amidst great rejoicing. The Bacchic mysteries were given every 3 years, and like the Eleusinian mysteries, were divided into 2 degrees. The initiates were crowned with myrtle and ivy, plants that were sacred to Bacchus. In the Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins conclusively establishes Bacchus, Dionysus, as one of the early pagan forms of the Christos myth. The birthplace of Bacchus, called Sabazius or Sabaoth, was claimed by several places in Greece, but on Mount Zelmissus, in Thrace, his worship seems to have been chiefly celebrated. He was born of a virgin on the 25th of December. He performed great miracles for the good of mankind, particularly one in which he changed water into wine. Wow, where have we heard that story before? He rode in a triumphal procession on an ass. He was put to death by the Titans and rose again from the dead on the 25th of March, and he was always called the Savior. In his mysteries, he was shown to the people as an infant is by the Christians at this day on Christmas Day morning in Rome. While Apollo most generally represents the sun, Bacchus is also a form of solar energy, for his resurrection was accomplished with the assistance of Apollo. The resurrection of Bacchus signifies merely the extraction or disentanglement of the various parts of the Bacchic constitution from the Titanic constitution of the world. This is symbolized by the smoke or soot rising from the burned bodies of the Titans. The soul is symbolized by smoke because it is extracted by the fire of the mysteries. Smoke signifies the ascension of the soul, for evolution is the process of the soul rising, like smoke, from the divinely consumed material mass. At one time, the Bacchic rites were of a high order, but later they became much degraded. The Bacchanalia, or orgies of Bacchus, are famous in literature. The following paragraph from Porphyry gives a fairly adequate conception of Eleusinian symbolism. God being a luminous principle, residing in the midst of the most subtle fire, he remains forever invisible to the eyes of those who do not elevate themselves above material life. On this account, the sight of transparent bodies such as crystal, Parian marble, and even ivory recalls the idea of divine light, as the sight of gold excites an idea of its purity, for gold cannot be sullied. Some have thought by a black stone was signified the invisibility of the divine essence. To express supreme reason, the divinity was represented under the human form, and beautiful, for God, or the first principle, was the source of beauty. And that was me interjecting, okay? When I say the first principle, it's just another term, right? Is a source of beauty of different ages and in various attitudes, sitting or upright, or one or the other sex, as a virgin or a young man, a husband or a bride, that all the shades and gradations might be marked. Everything luminous was subsequently attributed to the gods. The sphere and all that is spherical to the universe, to the sun and the moon, sometimes to fortune and to hope. The circle and all circular figures to eternity, to the celestial movements, to the circles and zones of the heavens. The section of circles to the phases of the moon, and pyramids and obelisks, to the ingenious principle, and through that to the gods of heavens. A cone expresses the sun, a cylinder the earth. The phallus and triangle designate generation. And it also says here the phallus and triangle, and in brackets it says a symbol of the matrix. Designate generation. The Eleusinian mysteries, according to Hecate Thorne, survived all others and did not cease to exist as an institution until nearly 400 years after Christ, when they were finally suppressed by Theodosius, styled the Great, who cruelly destroyed all who did not accept the Christian faith. Of this greatest of all philosophical institutions, Cicero said that it taught men not only how to live, but also how to die. Orpheus, the Thracian bard, the great initiator of the Greeks, ceased to be known as a man and was celebrated as a divinity several centuries before the Christian era. As to Orpheus himself, writes Thomas Taylor, scarcely a vestige of his life is to be found amongst the immense ruins of time. For who has ever been able to affirm anything with certainty of his origin, his age, his country, and condition? This alone may be depended on, from general assent, that there formerly lived a person named Orpheus, who was the founder of theology among the Greeks, the institutor of their lives and morals, the first of prophets and the prince of poets, himself the offspring of a muse. I have to interject there, it just makes me think, maybe he was one of these half man, half god beings, one of the heroes. Anyway, who taught the Greeks their sacred rites and mysteries, and from whose wisdom, as from a perennial and abundant fountain, the divine muse of Homer and the sublime theology of Pythagoras and Plato flowed. So now we're talking about the Orphic mysteries. Orpheus was the founder of the Grecian mythological system that he used as the medium for the promulgation of his philosophical doctrines. The origin of his philosophy is uncertain. He may have gotten it from the Brahmins, there being legends to the effect that he got it that he got it from a Hindu. Or, it's hard, I think there's a typo here. There being legends to the effect that he got it was a Hindu. His name possibly being derived from something, looks like Greek letters, meaning dark. Orpheus was initiated into the Egyptian mysteries, from which he secured extensive knowledge of magic, astrology, sorcery, and medicine. Mysteries of the Kabiri at Samothrace were also conferred upon him, and these undoubtedly contributed to his knowledge of medicine and music. The romance of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of the tragic episodes of Greek mythology and apparently constitutes the outstanding feature of the Orphic rite. Eurydice, in her attempt to escape from a villain seeking to seduce her, died from the venom of a poisonous serpent that stung her in the heel. Orpheus, penetrating to the very heart of the underworld, so charmed Pluto and Persephone with the beauty of his music that they agreed to permit Eurydice to return to life if Orpheus could lead her back to the sphere of the living without once looking around to see if she was following. So great was his fear, however, that she would stray from him, that he turned his head, and Eurydice, with a heartbroken cry, was swept back into the land of death. Orpheus wandered the earth for a while, disconsolate, and there are several conflicting accounts of the manner of his death. Some declare that he was slain by a bolt of lightning, and others that, failing to save his beloved, he committed suicide. The generally accepted version of his death, however, is that he was torn to pieces by Ciconian women whose advances he had spurned. In the 10th book of Plato's Republic, it's declared that, because of his sad fate at the hands of women, the soul that had once been Orpheus, upon being destined to live again in the physical world, chose rather to return in the body of a swan than be born of woman. The head of Orpheus, after being torn from his body, was cast with his lyre into the river Hebrus, down which it floated to the sea, where, wedging in a cleft in a rock, it gave oracles for many years. The lyre, after being stolen from its shrine and working the destruction of the thief, was picked up by the gods and fashioned into a constellation. Orpheus has long been sung of as the patron of music. On his 7-stringed lyre he played such perfect harmonies that the gods themselves were moved to acclaim his power. When he touched the strings of his instrument, the birds and beasts gathered around him, and as he wandered through the forests, his enchanting melodies caused even the ancient trees with mighty effort to draw their gnarled roots from out of the earth and follow him. Orpheus is one of the many immortals. Aha! He was an immortal. I think that means, yeah, he must have been a demigod. That's what I was thinking. Who have sacrificed themselves that mankind might have the wisdom of the gods. By the symbolism of his music, he communicated the divine secrets to humanity, and several authors have declared that the gods, though loving him, feared that he would overthrow their kingdom and therefore reluctantly encompassed his destruction. As time passed on, the historical Orpheus became hopelessly confounded with the doctrine he represented and eventually became the symbol of the Greek school of the ancient wisdom. Thus, Orpheus was declared to be the son of Apollo, the divine and perfect truth, and Calliope, the muse of harmony and rhythm. In other words, Orpheus is the secret doctrine, Apollo, revealed through music, Calliope. Eurydice is humanity, dead from the sting of the serpent of false knowledge and imprisoned in the underworld of ignorance. In this allegory, Orpheus signifies theology, which wins her from the king of the dead, but fails to accomplish her resurrection because it falsely estimates and mistrusts the innate understanding within the human soul. The Ciconian women who tore Orpheus limb from limb symbolize the various contending theological factions which destroy the body of truth. They cannot accomplish this, however, until their discordant cries drown out the harmony drawn by Orpheus from his magic lyre. Lear, I can't pronounce that. The head of Orpheus signifies the esoteric doctrines of his cult. These doctrines continue to live and speak even after his body has been destroyed. His body, the cult, has been destroyed. The lyre is the secret teaching of Orpheus. The 7 strings are the 7 divine truths, which are the keys to universal knowledge. And my interjection would be there. It's like, well, it's very interesting, We have 7 chakras. I wonder if there's any connection there. The differing accounts of his death represent the various means used to destroy the secret teachings. Wisdom can die in many ways at the same time. The allegory of Orpheus incarnating in the white swan merely signifies that the spiritual truths he promulgated will continue and will be taught by the illumined initiates of all future ages. The swan is a symbol of the initiates of the mysteries. It is a symbol also of the divine power, which is the progenitor of the world. Just a little bit more, and that's going to take us up to the top of the hour. Okay? And that is the Bacchic and Dionysiac rites. The Bacchic rite centers around the allegory of the youthful Bacchus, Dionysus, or Zagreus, being torn to pieces by the Titans. These giants accomplish the destruction of Bacchus by causing him to become fascinated by his own image in a mirror. After dismembering him, the Titans first boiled the pieces in water and afterwards roasted them. Pallas rescued the heart of the murdered god, and by this precaution Bacchus, Dionysus, was enabled to spring forth again in all his former glory. Jupiter, the demiurgus, beholding the crime of the Titans, hurled his thunderbolts and slew them, burning their bodies to ashes with heavenly fire. Out of the ashes of the Titans, which also contained a portion of the flesh of Bacchus, whose body they'd partly devoured, the human race was created. Thus, the mundane life of every man was said to contain a portion of the Bacchic life. For this reason, the Greek mysteries warned against suicide. He who attempts to destroy himself raises his hand against the nature of Bacchus within him, since man's body is indirectly the tomb of this god and must consequently be preserved with the greatest of care. Bacchus, or Dionysus, represents the rational soul of the inferior world. He is the chief of the Titans, the artificers of the mundane spheres. The Pythagoreans called him the Titanic monad. Thus, Bacchus is the all-inclusive idea of the Titanic sphere and the Titans, or gods of the fragments, the active agencies by means of which universal substance is fashioned into the pattern of this idea. The Bacchic state signifies the unity of the rational soul in a state of self-knowledge. The unity of the rational soul in a state of self-knowledge. And the Titanic state, the diversity of the rational soul, which, being scattered throughout creation, loses the consciousness of its own essential oneness. The mirror into which Bacchus gazes, and which is the cause of his fall, is the great sea of illusion, the lower world fashioned by the Titans. Bacchus, the mundane rational soul, seeing his image before him, accepts the image as a likeness of himself and ensouls the likeness. That is, the rational idea ensouls its reflection, the irrational universe. By ensouling the irrational image, it implants in it the urge to become like its source, the rational. Therefore, the ancients said that man does not know the gods by logic or by reason, but rather by realizing the presence of the gods within himself. After Bacchus gazed into the mirror and followed his own reflection into matter, the rational soul of the world was broken up and distributed by the Titans throughout the mundane sphere of which it is the essential nature. But the heart or source of it they could not scatter. The Titans took the dismembered body of Bacchus and boiled it in water, symbol of immersion in the material universe, which represents the incorporation of the Bacchic principle into form. The pieces were afterwards roasted to signify the subsequent ascension of the spiritual nature out of form. Remember earlier they were saying that, like the smoke that rises from that body is symbolic of the animating spirit or force that was within that body, right? When Jupiter, the father of Bacchus and the demiurgus of the universe, saw that the Titans were hopelessly involving the rational or divine idea by scattering its members through the constituent parts of the lower world, he slew the Titans in order that the divine idea might not be entirely lost. From the ashes of the Titans he formed mankind, whose purpose of existence was to preserve and eventually to release the Bacchic idea or rational soul from the Titanic fabrication. Jupiter, being the demiurgus and fabricator of the material universe, is the third person of the creative triad, consequently the Lord of Death. For death exists only in the lower sphere of being over which he presides. My note, right, when you become the fully awakened and connected divine, like where you've connected with that divinity that is within, you don't taste of death anymore, right? So death exists only in the lower spheres that he presides over, right? Disintegration takes place so that reintegration may follow upon a higher level of form or intelligence. The thunderbolts of Jupiter are emblematic of his disintegrative power. They reveal the purpose of death, which is to rescue the rational soul from the devouring power of the irrational nature. Man is a composite creature, his lower nature consisting of the fragments of the Titans, and his higher nature the sacred immortal flesh, life of Bacchus. Therefore, man is capable of either a Titanic, irrational, or a Bacchic, rational existence. The Titans of Hesiod, who are 12 in number, are probably analogous to the celestial zodiac, whereas the Titans who murdered and dismembered Bacchus represent the zodiacal powers, distorted by their involvement in the material world. Thus, Bacchus represents the sun, dismembered by the signs of the zodiac, and from whose body the universe is formed. When the terrestrial forms were created from the various parts of his body, the sense of wholeness was lost, and the sense of separateness was established. The heart of Bacchus, which was saved by Pallas or Minerva, was lifted out of the four elements symbolized by his dismembered body and placed in the ether. The heart of Bacchus is the immortal center of the rational soul. After the rational soul had been distributed throughout creation and the nature of man, the Bacchic mysteries were instituted for the purpose of disentangling it from the irrational Titanic nature. This disentanglement was the process of lifting the soul out of the state of separateness into that of unity. The various parts and members of Bacchus were collected from the different corners of the earth. When all the rational parts are gathered, Bacchus is resurrected. The rites of Dionysos were very similar to those of Bacchus, and by many these two gods are considered to be one. Statues of Dionysos were carried in the Eleusinian mysteries, especially the lesser degrees. Bacchus, representing the soul of the mundane sphere, was capable of an infinite multiplicity of form and designations. Dionysos apparently was his solar aspect of Bacchus. The Dionysiac architects constituted an ancient secret society in principles and doctrines much like the modern Freemasonic order. They were an organization of builders bound together by their secret knowledge of the relationship between the earthly and the divine sciences of architectonics. They were supposedly employed by King Solomon in the building of his temple, although they were not Jews, nor did they worship the god of the Jews, being followers of Bacchus and Dionysus. The Dionysiac architects erected many of the great monuments of antiquity. They possessed a secret language and a system of marking their stones. They had annual convocations and sacred feasts. The exact nature of their doctrines is unknown. It's believed that Chiram Abiff was an initiate of this society. All right, and that brings us up pretty much to the top of the hour here. And yeah, that's going to do it for that. Excuse me. Just scrolling back here for 2 seconds here. That was the Ancient Mysteries and Secret Societies Part 3. Yeah, that was pretty interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that you learned some things while you were here. And yeah, that you enjoyed yourself, right? And thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your time. Hope to see you back here again real soon. We're going to be picking it up later with another reading. Follow along with me. We can read it together and have some fun and learn some stuff. All right. Until I see you back here again next time, you guys look after yourselves out there and take care. And bye for now. Bye, guys. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.